this afternoon at this all-day retreat. Quite a number of people here, and perhaps there'll be some people joining us on the line, since I think we're hooked up to YouTube. There's lots of topics in Buddhism that can be used as subject, lots of forms, lots of structures, concepts, like the Four Noble Truths, the 12 links in the chain of existence, the Eightfold Path, and all kinds of things that we can look at that help us. And sometimes we find particular ones that are very helpful and supportive to our awareness practice, whether we're Buddhist, think of ourselves as Buddhist or not. And a lot of times they're just concepts that we contemplate relative to that, relative to our, we call it progression or progress, as we go along, as we work with our mind. As soon as you hold still, stop, insofar as you can, stop everything without being aggressive, but just stop. Through contrast, you can see very clearly what moves, and it's actually kind of, you might say, minus the concepts. It takes a while, but it's like the concepts just kind of start to droop. Concepts don't like to droop. Concepts like to be very sharp and clear and like little boxes and pigeonholes, and have this and have that and have that. So the upside of concepts is they give us some kind of a form, just like we have forms in here. We have a way to sit. We have a time. We have when the Hanan bell, when that is struck, we know that there's a certain time structure that we're going to be working with. And so there's lots of structures. The downside of those is when we begin to cling to those concepts or those ideas of right and wrong and this and that and correct and incorrect. Then we start to cover up the very awareness that we're trying to, you could say, liberate, start to shut it down, usually out of fear. And the person going through that probably would not even call it fear. We'd call it something else because it's so covered up that they can't even see what it is. So today, the concept, well, first I should say, when I was doing that, what kept moving was Sheldon's feet. Sitting looking, and I realized that both feet are going like this. Feet, right? Or both feet are going like this, and then at some point the left feet got tired and just the right one kept going. You remember that? So was that a lack of awareness?
Yes. Or maybe I was aware that I didn't notice. I don't know.
Yeah, being aware that you didn't notice, that's a good filler. I'm aware that I'm not aware. So the structure I was going to talk about today, and I highly encourage questions. Questions actually, I don't really know a lot, and I'm not just being silly here. I really don't have a lot of like information stacked up behind anything. On the other hand, if you ask questions, it helps together, then it helps me go down and see if there is some response to that would be helpful. Then it happens kind of automatically. You could say, I don't even have to think about it. I don't think very well. I'm not very clear. I would have a very difficult time studying anything according to someone else's plan. And that's why when I ran into my first teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, I realized I was really in for it, because I was not going to be able to do it my way anymore. I was going to have to actually look at these forms and structures and not just speculate, like most 17-year-olds do. I was still doing that when I was 32. Well, I think about this. What do you think? Well, I think this, I think that. Well, I've looked into this and looked into that. A lot of spinning around. So the the structure that I want to talk about today, and again, we ask questions about this, are well, it's the three noble, not noble, these are kind of ignoble. The three marks of existence, sometimes talked about as the four marks of existence. And I think I'll probably talk about all four. The first one, and this isn't, I don't know what order is traditional, but I usually can't remember that. So I'm going to start out with impermanence. Impermanence. Nothing lasts. Nothing lasts. Impermanence. It's a profound discovery. And it's a very, and it is such a discovery that as you keep looking at it and contemplating it, your awareness starts sinking down, further down. You can't find anything that's permanent. What you find is impermanent, not lasting. Might last 1,000 years, but then it's going down because 1,000 years is up. And the interesting thing about this is that the thinking process in the mind actually, through tracing the records of how things decay, what happens to wood over a long period of time, what happens to our bodies over a long period of time. So everything is slowly changing into something else. So whatever you find, form you find, whatever structure you find, it's starting to go into its opposite, which is to go from existence to non-existence, go from being here to not being here. Impermanent. And really seeing and witnessing and understanding and being a part of that impermanence gives rise to suffering, gives rise to discontent on so many different levels. Quite often people have thought of Buddhism as a pessimistic, nihilistic religion because it talks about suffering. But it's the idea that there's a discontent about just about everything. We notice even when you're really enjoying yourself, you start to think about that's going to come to an end. You know, it can't last. We're having fun for a while, but pretty soon it will be over. So impermanence, suffering, or not happy, it may come and go. There may be variations, vacillations, and so on, based on causes and conditions, based on our relative truth of things. But fundamentally, if we spend too much time in that area trying to figure out how to stop things from vanishing and disappearing, it gets more difficult. Try to maintain. This is what the next of the three marks needs, blah, 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 which is a fancy word that says there is nobody, there isn't any. And again, we're coming to something that is there, but yet it's not there. It's changing into something else. It's discontinuous. It's discontinuous. It shows up as something, but as soon as you look at it, grasp at it, try to lean on it or affirm it, it starts to turn into something else. And it creates what? Suffering. Why? Because it's impermanent. Because it won't last. So what does last? Oh, we'll get to that. Yes.
Isn't energy permanent?
Well, energy, we have another concept. And so let me ask you to define your terms. What do you mean by energy?
Could you say that things are permanent in that they keep arising and falling away?
You mean like a light bulb, a 60-cycle light bulb is going off on so fast that it looks like it's lit up?
No, like the bees, the trees, this physical phenomena keeps reappearing and reappearing.
Yes. So what's the point, or what's the question?
Is that not permanent? Is that permanent?
Does it look permanent?
Kind of.
Okay.
I mean, a tree, I know it arises, it grows, it matures, it dies. So you're saying that is not permanent. I am not permanent
Yeah.
because this
So
body,
that's an example of something. Anything that's there goes away. So you're saying, are you saying?
but
are
the
you asking-
energy that produces that, is that not permanent?
I don't know. How does it look to you?
Right now, it feels permanent.
Okay. Look closely see if you're actually looking at what that is, or if you're looking at your concept of what that is. Concept is very difficult to see if you're actually looking at the thing that is being conceptualized so we can communicate about it. I'm just asking you to look at it, not disagreeing with you. Because that would be impermanent.
One of the fundamental principles of science is energy is neither created nor destroyed.
Yeah.
So it would seem that there's a thread of permanence throughout existence. Do you see that?
I don't know. Do you? It's an interesting concept. I mean, it's an interesting idea, but also physics, if you are going to go into physics, which I'm not by any means, but we all have read a little bit about this and that. And the one that's always fascinated me is when they start to look at a particle, they can't tell if it's a particle or a wave. And it doesn't seem to, the more microscopic or subatomic that you get, there starts to be a fluctuation in there that won't hold still. So I don't know.
What about the Alaya consciousness?
What about it?
Is that permanent?
I don't know. What do you think?
I get how my life is not permanent, but there does seem to be a reoccurring theme that occurs.
Okay. So we could reflect for a minute on the idea of permanence. We get our understanding of something permanent and impermanent because it's changing from one thing into another. So even the concept of permanence needs impermanent to actually have some kind of meaning to it. So when we look at anything that's there, it's morphing into something else, into its opposite or into some other form. It's just not dependable. Nothing is dependable. Impermanent, creating suffering. Yes, go ahead.
So this seems more of a functional teaching rather than a universal principle type teaching.
Okay.
How does this mark of existence help us manage our own suffering?
Well, first of all, you can't really manage suffering. So first, this takes us into the no self. Is there a solid self? Who suffers? So going into that and see if there's some quality there that is happening, some way of understanding by looking and seeing, first of all, is there a solid being who's suffering? Is there someone who is there who is suffering? So I don't know if there's if you could call that managing. I don't think it's actually managing.
But we still stare more and more at our own suffering, and it seems like it definitely doesn't go away. In some cases, it's like scratching a sore, and it's like seems like it's getting worse.
Okay, what's the question?
The question would be, why keep scratching an open sore?
I don't know. Why do we? You do that, right?
Sure do.
Yeah. Why?
I can't help it.
Okay. Then you could actually drop the why question and go to a what question.
What is the open sore?
Yes. What is it?
It hurts.
It hurts. And if you go to why, what happens?
Stop looking at it.
Well, if you go to why, then we get a reason why it's happening, and then we become circular. Why? Because. Why? Because. Why? Because. Not incorrect. This is what the Buddha did when he looked at suffering. Why do we suffer? Because of desire. We want things to be different than they are. Things are a certain way, and we don't like that. We want something else to happen. We want to have some other situation. We want to have some say-so about it. More.
I don't know. I wish there was something I could do about it. It just kind of sucks.
Well, yeah, well, there is something you can do about it, and that's look deeply into it. Look deeply into who suffers here on the cushion in your life, in your movement through life, through what they call meditation and action.
Is that open sore? Is that open sore permanent?
I don't think anything is permanent. Using the same concepts. I mean, even acknowledging what you're saying about energy. I mean, we can get conceptually into stuff. Well, we know what everything, we kind of know what everything does. This moves here, this gets hot, this gets cold, this moves over, this turns, this is square, and this, all the corners disappear, and we get a circle. We know what things do, but we don't know fundamentally what they are. I mean, actually knowing. I come at that with a concept. And the way I approach that is saying, if you ask me what anything is, I will tell you. I can tell you what it is, but it's a concept. It's not the realization. If you say, well, what is that? I say, not separate. This is the beginning of compassion. When you see that the suffering that you're having, the suffering that someone else is having, not separate. And this is when it's the genuine feeling with starts to occur. But as long as we're focused on our own suffering, then we get trapped, you could say, by the apparent presumption that we're suffering and our suffering is somehow special or different from others, and we're going to fix our own suffering or correct our own suffering or get rid of our own suffering or explain away our suffering. More about that? How are you feeling, by the way?
I have my ups and downs,
Yeah.
so I'm feeling good right now, though.
Okay. Don't hesitate to leave if you need to.
It's all sitting back there, so.
Okay. Jason?
Last week, we talked a little bit about the universality of the guru.
Yes.
Could you explain, or could you help me understand what that means in reference to impermanence?
I think the universality of the guru or the teaching person is basically saying that if you understand what it means to be a student, and if you realize what this really means, really deeply, beyond or not including your own fear-based self-centeredness, you really understand that, then everything is teaching you. So there's what Trungpa Rinpoche coined the term, the universality of the guru. And he has a chapter on that, I think, in Cutting Through. Is it Cutting Through? That's in?
Well, he
Or is it?
does talk about the guru can be anything, not just a physical teacher.
Yes, and quite often what's been being suggested there, especially in the Tibetan tradition, is that you actually need the teaching person to introduce you to your world, to introduce you to the world in the way that so that you begin to see the nature of the world in terms of a teaching. As long as you're a student, then everything is teaching you. We sometimes experience that when we're in a really difficult situation where the world is not going our way, and we start to dream up all kinds of ideas how this shouldn't be this way. I don't deserve this. This is a famous response you hear all the time. Well, I don't deserve this. So that's a pretty presumptuous commentary on anything that's happening. So I think as far as universality, it just is, simply put, it's just saying that whatever is happening, there's a teaching, again, about the nature of things, about the nature of your world, about who you are, and ultimately and fundamentally and ultimately that you're not separate from anything. You're not separate from this, you're not separate from the water, you're not separate from the floor, and it's not some kind of highfalutin feeling, oh, we're all one. Actually, we're not all one. We're not separate. All one means that things that were separate are smushed together. Now we're all one. But the realization is what you thought was separate has never been. Fundamentally, it's not separate. It has the same core. Sometimes we break things down so that we can see the separations so that we can better understand the no separation that is there. just like the five skandhas are form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness. In order to study what this human being, this human arrangement of body, speech, mind, and all the things that go along with it, passion, aggression, ignorance. In order to really see that, we need to break it down into parts so that we can look more closely at this aspect or this quality. That's very difficult for me to do because I'm very dyslexic. And that I don't know where I'm coming or going most of the time. So, is that helpful? And I don't need to know. Knowing where you're at on the positive side, it feels like, okay, I know what I'm doing, I know what's going on. But if you really know this, if you really see, if you really realize that this is not separate, what we're doing here, then your whole life is about others. This doesn't mean that you don't get to, take a break and, have a beer. Well, I can't have beer though. But it doesn't mean you can't take a break, that you don't have no personal time left whatsoever. But it's not damn far away from it. It's like you really are at the mercy of your world from the point of view of being an individual. You're still an individual. You may be even more of an individual because now you finally are not fighting with your world anymore. You're not fighting with yourself. You don't care whether you look like an egomaniac or not, because you know the truth yourself. You know it. And you're able to live your karma. You're able to live your karma into the world without any kind of commentary about, should I do this? Shouldn't I do that? The forks in the road absolutely vanish. There's only one direction. There's only one direction. And it's not separate. Bailey?
You said that things have the same core.
Yes.
In terms of not separate. What is the core?
Not separate. No separation. Separated, yes. No, separated, but fundamentally not separate. Functioning together. You don't have to tell your first finger how to relate to the thumb. They're not separate. Shoka.
How does looking at different forms of consciousness help us to go deeper into the three seals?
Again, please.
How does looking at the different forms of consciousness,
Like what?
like meditation or spirit release therapy, healing work,
Okay.
how does that help us to go deeper into the three seals or any of the seals?
I don't know. How's it look to you?
Not separate.
Huh?
Not separate.
That's pretty good. What do you think, Jason?
I don't know what 3 seals are.
Oh, three marks of
Three
existence.
marks.
It's just another way of talking about the 3 marks. 3 marks, 3 seals. Probably, 3 mud ducks. How's it look to you? What he just asked about.
It seems like whatever level of consciousness you're endeavoring to observe, you're looking at the experience of your life, maybe with the support of the construct of the 3 marks. But maybe this level of consciousness is looking from this angle, and this level is looking from this angle. So it's just a way to look, maybe.
I think one of the things that's really powerful realization about the nature of the mind, the nature of thinking, the nature of living our life and trying to understand what fundamentally is important, what is true, what is genuine, what we can, trust or put some or lean on, is to see if you can see that it's discontinuous, the grasping at a self as being somebody who can win or lose, and the grasping at another who can be for you or against you. The separation is the fundamental separation of me and you guys, or me and the world, That separation is so deeply embedded, and it is reinforced all the time by the conflict that we have in this life and in past lives. Been going on for a long time. And so we keep going through that same cycle. We go through that cycle and we try to understand, And that's why there's a spiritual path. And the spiritual path can take all kinds of forms. And it also can take what? Forever. You can do this forever. Go round and around. It's called samsara. That's the Sanskrit word for big circle or total world. Round and round, I guess.
Then what's the difference between forever and permanent?
Same thing. It's just a way of talking about it.
Well, isn't a mark of existence impermanence?
Yeah. Good one. Keep coming.
Then why did you tell Anne and Jigme? Well, Anne asked about energy, and I forget what Jigme asked. You said,
Why did I tell them
hmm?
that? Why?
Well, we're talking about impermanence, and you just said forever.
Yeah, I did.
So what's up with that?
But what about what you're using some kind of example of them and you?
Well, energy, maybe forever.
Okay, what's the question?
Wasn't,
Not what's up with that. What's the question?
well, you just said forever. Isn't
Yeah.
forever permanent?
Yeah.
But a mark of existence is impermanence.
Yes.
So is there permanence and impermanence?
So thank you. You just explained the difference between what is there and what is being pointed at. Concepts, you have to, if you have to know what a concept is to see that the concept is not what it's pointing at. You can say forever, it's still relative. Even forever is going down.
To look.
No, it's gonna.
Oh, like
no,
down,
more
down.
Forever. Yeah,
Going down to Chinatown?
Going down to Chinatown looking for, what do they call those little, what are those dumplings? Pot stickers.
Wontons.
Wonton.
It's good soup.
In your,
Joan.
in your experience watching students, and from what you've heard, is the process of realization, realizing that we are not separate, like an erosion, or is it sudden? Is there
Very-
suddenness, or is it both?
Very good question, and this is something that shows up in all the traditions, and particularly in the Zen tradition of the Sudden School and the gradual school of enlightenment or awakening, and there's been disagreements and so on. And the way it looks here is it's a little of each. It's some of it, there's sudden flashes, and then there's a gradual erosion. I think that's a good word. It's an erosion of this. They don't even say this in your mind. You don't say, oh, this isn't going to work. You just see things are just coming apart, and your awareness, because you're practicing, because you're continually looking at what moves, eventually you begin to have an understanding of the movement that is really, really, really deep, goes way into it, and you begin to see. This is why there's lots of images that are mirror-like images. You begin to see yourself, and it's not like exactly like looking in a mirror, but there's a quality of your perception, something starting to come back to you, come towards you. We so often go out into the world trying to find stuff, look at stuff, do stuff, be somebody. And the practice that we're doing here is to hold very still and allow things to come to you, starting with your own mind. Allow the things to go. If you object to anything in there, you've just stopped investigating for the next 6 months. One moment. And so the gradual and the instantaneous might be an opening into that where you see something, but usually that opening closes down. There's a few situations where people have had the flash and they've stayed open, you could say. There's just kind of a corny way of saying it, because you can't stay in some situation that you've always been in. There's no point in putting it out or saying it that way. But I think there's something happening. If those flashes happen early on, then there's a gradual staring at the tree for 10 eons, like it says in the song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi. One on the verge of attaining awakening. In other words, they got some flashes of this, and that but they keep falling back into relative situation and thinking there's, there's something, but I lost it. I can't find it again. I had it for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or half an hour, and we're all one. We have this great feeling that's, we jump up and down maybe. We're so excited about it. And then it vanishes or goes away, or we shut down on it, and then we go back to the gradual situation. And then eventually then it might look like an erosion. And then there's the other way around where you start in and there's a very gradual practice that could culminate. So then would you say it's gradual, or you couldn't really pin anything on it? It would be so completely wound into and interspersed with the causes and conditions that any particular individual brought to the cushion or brought to their practice, where you came from, what happened, what was happening to you in the 14th century. And I'm not just kidding. I'm saying what happened to this particular spirit, this spirit, soul, deeper self than just the ego that's a concoction of things based on hope and fear. But what's been happening? What is that spiritual path? What is that journey? And in this lifetime, here we are. There's a gradual part of it, and everything, I'm sure everyone here has had some kind of flashes of things, on some level. And if not, you probably will if you keep doing this. And then there's also a gradual kind of a noticing that quite often will show up to other people around you rather than to you. If it starts to show up to you, then you might get embarrassed and think you're getting too uppity about yourself. So then you'll shut it down. It takes a lot of a willingness. This is why Trungpa Rinpoche would often, one of the ways he characterized a part of the practice that I think was very valuable is a willingness to be a fool. And a willingness to when you start to have this feeling of pride, of not wanting to be disrespected, or not wanting to do something that's embarrassing, or that there's a willingness to just feel that energy that because that comes in, and actually the heat from that kind of a feeling is so hot that the self-centeredness can't get enough oxygen there. So it starts the feeling of it is one of dying or death, and so it can be frightening. That's why it's so necessary to have a structure like this, from my point of view. To have a structure like this that's so you can slowly come apart at the seams and be protected by your teacher, your sangha, the teaching, and give you a structure whereby you can dissolve the self-centeredness and go back to your original, your true face, which is not separate. Buddha nature. Is that helpful? Sheldon?
Realization means that you see the truth. Are there small pieces of realization that do they like fit together like a puzzle till you see the actual realization?
As I follow you, I don't have that experience. I'm not saying that couldn't be an experience of people are, wired in different ways. I'm not saying that things couldn't come together that way. I've not seen that. It looks like those are partial. If that was your realization, then they wouldn't go away. They wouldn't look partial. They wouldn't look impartial. You wouldn't have any kind of dynamic whereby you could understand it. That's why often when someone begins to realize this, they're tongue-tied. They might be tongue-tied for 20 years. Ramana Maharshi awoke in late 1800s and spent 20 years in a cave. But he awoke, but then he went and stared at the tree for 20 years or looked at his mind for a long period of time. And even then, he didn't come out with some kind of pretentious story. People wanted to be around him. Go ahead.
So if you had actually had small bits realization, you probably wouldn't even know it.
I think I follow what you're saying, but it's a possibility that you don't know, but I think it's kind of complicated there. With all of the things that we're trying to sort, anytime we start to sort something out, it starts to break up. And instead of going with the breakup, we want to keep it together so that we can get what it is. Whereas the realization part is everything flies apart. It's a collapse. Just like Colin's translation of the Heart Sutra that we do every evening. Instead of saying gone, gone, gone completely, beyond, awake, so be it. He translates gate, gate, paragate, parasangate, bodhisattva as falling apart, falling apart, falling apart, nothing to do. So it's like there's no agenda anymore, unless you're in a situation where you have people who are trying to understand what this all is about, what this means. And in that case, then you can't help but teach or help them because you're not separate from them. They don't know that you're peeking out of their back pocket. This. Don't sit on me. They don't, generally people don't realize how extremely intimate this kind of teaching situation is.
Could there be a falling away of knowing?
Yeah, there is. It's called the Korean master who passed away several years ago called Sang Song. I think I pronounced his name. He's Korean. He has a book that's called and a way of teaching called Only Don't Know Mind. Have you heard of that?
I've heard you talk about it.
Only don't know mind. It's like, stop worrying about knowing stuff. Only don't know. Have a willingness to just be in a fog, because you're in one anyway. We try to cover up the fog with our ideas, our concepts, our judgments, our beliefs, our opinions, our commentary. If you're in a fog, and you begin to speak. If you're in a fog and you're silent, not much difference. It's like if you're in a fog right now, and I compliment you, it won't find you. That compliment won't find you. It'll just be a description.
What would it be if it wasn't just a description?
What?
What would the compliment be if it wasn't just a description?
It would be something that you would perceive as thinking I really liked you. No, I don't. Yes, sir.
How does the concept of clarity fit into this state of fogginess?
So it's just a concept. And so we use the concept so that we can encourage people to see lack of clarity, see clarity. So we work with it in a conceptual way. So the state of fogginess, it begins in being very clear about how foggy it is. I often say about anything that you're experiencing is look at the awareness instead of saying, oh, this is happening, that's happening, I'm falling apart, I'm coming apart, or this is not working, and I'm so jealous, or I'm so, I have, every time I look at this or that person, I have terrible opinions and feelings, and then I might say, well, but look at how aware you are of that, how nuts you are. It's the awareness. The awareness is king. The awareness is queen. Everything that arises in it is a pawn. But everything that arises in it is just parts, discontinuous, all looking for some kind of togetherness, not realizing that everything is already together. You don't have to fix something that's never been broke. Longchenpa talks about this in the 14th century. a great perfection. Nothing to fix. Which doesn't deny all of the things that seem so apparently broken or at war or coming out of confusion, coming out of grasping, coming out of passion, aggression, ignorance, pushing, pulling, shutting down. That kind of turmoil can just be included, doesn't have to be fought with. The more awareness you bring to that, the less power that kind of circularity is going to get. It just starts to wind down. Could be called a gradual path. Keep me.
But then there's suffering, and in a state of compassion, you want to do something about that. So if everything is already
This is kind of setting me up for something.
I just don't understand. I don't get how everything can, nothing needs to be done, but yet
Yes.
there's so much suffering, and I have such a strong urge to do something about it.
Yes, you do. And you're doing something about it. Your profession is about helping people. So you are doing something. You're working in the relative world in exactly the way you should be. So what's your question? You want it to all be over with?
Yeah, I would love to not do anything.
But you can not do anything in the midst of all the stuff you're doing. You're a young guy, you got time.
Let's hope so.
Well,
It's just really hard.
I know it's hard, but questions will help bring out more. But they need to be questions. They need to be questions that are not just not just challenging questions. Follow me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're already, I can help you. You're already doing what you need to do. It's just like when I look at you, I look at a lot of people. I'm seeing you're on the side of a mountain, and you're sewing a rock suit, and you're trying to find a way to become awake. You're trying to find a way to become compassionate. You're trying to find a way to work with your own negativities. I'm describing this pretty well. And I would say, using the relative image, you're on the side of a mountain and you're going up. And the teaching person is like a person who goes up and down the mountain all the time, talking to people. And this teaching person is saying, you're fine. I'm not saying it doesn't suck or it doesn't feel painful or there aren't sinkholes and tree limbs and bumblebees and polar bears. Well, probably not polar bears, no, but pumas. So look out, be careful. Don't be what is that called when somebody attacks you from in hiding? Ambush, yeah. I like that. Assassin's not bad either. Ambush anymore?
A victim? Don't be a victim.
Don't be a man. Yeah, that's not bad. Don't be a victim of hope and fear. Those are the bandits in the Tibetan tradition called the bandits of hope and fear that steal your wisdom. Your wisdom is fine. You can't take wisdom away. All you can do is stick stuff on it out of fear. We don't trust because we feel like if we don't trust, we feel like there's something that needs protecting. And it may need protecting, but we need to do it with awareness rather than with some kind of defensiveness where we're protecting and then we're getting our weapons together. We're going to kill off all the things so life will be perfect from now on. So you're going up the mountain and from my point of view, which functioning as someone who helps you in that way, I'm saying you're doing fine. Continue to suffer exactly how you're suffering. Continue to practice. Continue to look at things. Take nothing for granted. Don't take anything for granted. This does not mean that. This is this. This is this. They're self-existing. They're just this. Sometimes called a dewdrop. Like looking at water and seeing the moon's reflection in it. That's a Zen standard Zen image.
But when you say that there's nothing to fix, I'm so full of anger.
Yeah.
And I am lacking in wisdom and compassion.
And you're trying to fix it.
I'm trying to fix it.
Stop it.
How's that different than aggression?
Because aggression feels validated. You don't feel validated, do you?
But my genuine feeling is to grasp for this, grasp for understanding, and push away my ignorance.
Well, it's a warfare, kind of warfare. So what you bring, what do you do with that? Well, just be aware. Be aware that that's what you're doing. Don't even have to stop that. Even that needs to be, something is happening there where you need to go through that. Because intellectually, you understand this. You understand that your aggression, your warfare is not particularly helping anything. And pushing something away is not helping anything. It just creates more tension, more suffering, more difficulty. So what's being said is, insofar as you can, relax and look at it. That's what this training here is about. That's why we have this forum. That's why all this, everything we do in here is not meant to get you to join a club. It's not a club. But it provides a space where you can come in, you can sit down, you can watch your mind, watch whatever arises in your mind, watch it calm, and then it stays for a while, and then it goes away. Something else comes up, and it goes away. If you do anything with whatever arises, then you've signed a contract. 30 minutes, half an hour, 10 weeks. You're suddenly engaged with that thing that you're trying to push away or trying to get more of or trying to ignore. But do nothing, but just observe that, falling apart, nothing to do. If there's nothing to do, then if there really is nothing to do, then anything that shows up that needs your help, you're completely free to help that with permission. You wouldn't do it without permission. And then when that situation is, but there's nothing that says that's going to continue. That may go away. And then something else may arise. It's very much like a dance without the music. More? Did I put it in to sleep?
I'm listening.
Oh. Cool.
Actually,
Yes, Igor.
is there, hearing you speak about things come up and go away, is there a difference between being the observer that lets things come up and go away and the state of haziness where, like when you're tired, for example, and you can't focus at something, so you can't really latch on, or it seems that you can't latch on to something. Is there a difference?
Between what?
Just being sitting and things come and go, and I don't know.
One is haziness and the other one is no haziness.
Okay.
It's different.
Is there a quality of ignorance to the haziness?
Yes. There's a quality of ignorance to the clarity.
Okay. Can you explain more what you mean?
Nope. I wish I could. But you can do it for me to explain or conceptualize something that I think is valuable in seeing what it is and knowing it's very difficult to bring. It gets more and more difficult to bring concepts that actually fit what's happening with you. It's more and more difficult. Are you listening to me?
Yes.
Good.
I sometimes have to look away to listen better.
It's all right. Me too. Really?
When we actually see that there's nothing to do, how does our experience of suffering change?
I think it probably expands, but it doesn't belong to anyone anymore. There's no person who's suffering who needs to be fixed or corrected There's no suffering that we need to somehow stop it. We just relate to the suffering in the world. You're just not separate from it. You can't hardly tell if it's your own suffering or someone else's. And in that way, compassion arises just spontaneously. And it arises out of emptiness. If you see emptiness, then compassion will arise out of that. If you understand or see things are empty of what you think they are. Whatever you look at anything, whatever you think it is empty of that. If you can look at something without seeing what you think it is, and you can see what it is, then you begin to see emptiness. And you see, at the same time you see emptiness, you begin to see that it's not only empty, it's incredibly present. Overwhelmingly present, sometimes called luminosity. No?
It's the third noble truth that suffering can cease.
Yes.
So how does that fit in with the fact that suffering is still?
So it gets kind of disappointing here. I don't have to go over anything. The suffering ceasing, or nirodha, or the third noble truth, after practicing the fourth noble truth, which is discipline, meditation, and wisdom, or shila, samadhi, and prajna. Practicing that helps us begin to bring our personal suffering to an end. But what it actually does, I mean, it's like that, but it's also bringing the whole thing of identity to an end, of a personal identity. So that's happening. The difficult part comes when we see that it both comes to an end and it doesn't come to an end. So it's both and neither. We get into a situation where we start to lose our reference points. And this is where the realizing that everyone around you is suffering and is in distress, then you turn to them and help them with their permission, and seeing that there's an openness to actually being able to do that. And that might be anything from giving them some money, simple, or taking care of them, or, could be very simple situation. Could be just listening to them. No advice at all, just listen.
Could there be another phrase instead of what the third noble truth says now that would be more helpful in understanding it?
I think that it transcends the third noble truth is relative teaching, or provisional. It's not the direct, it's not the actual situation, it's the relative part of the teaching. We have to start out with suffering. The Buddha saw reality and did start talking about that immediately. He started with where people are at. You're suffering. Cause of suffering is wanting things to be different than they are. And that can come to an end. But you're going to have to train yourself, train your mind. And so you could take it further and say, not in that teaching, you kind of have to leave that teaching alone, but you could say that it's both there and not there. So it's no longer has a solid situation happening, and no longer happens to an individual. The individual is gone. The belief or the grasping at a self or the grasping at another. Like if you blame someone else for something, you're actually grasping at an other. You're thinking there's another person that caused this, that stole your car. And the interesting thing, what makes it so difficult, is someone did actually steal your car. A person actually who was confused and needed a car, took your car, and now you no longer have a car. So the relative part of it is just incredibly strong. You see it, what's this thing about, no praise, no blame that Buddhists talk about? Obviously, took my car. So it makes it difficult to work with. On the other hand, if you see the causes and conditions, that everything is dependently arisen. So even that person who did that, and even you as an owner of a car, and of that particular car, and actually being able to own a car, and even be a living being, and even have a driver's license, and even be in a place where they have roads, not to mention cars. And then this person comes through their karma and their bad luck, however you want to say it, through their various things. You don't know what happened to them. You don't know why they needed the car. You're not even concerned about it. Just like when in the penal system that we have, nobody looks and sees why somebody who committed a crime really deeply. Let's find out why, what's going on back there. What were the causes and conditions that created that? It's not that we would have to ferret out every little thing that happened, but just a realization that things are dependently arisen. So everything that happens is coming out of a completely vast network of uncountable number of causes and conditions, and that's why things are produced that way. So therefore, the ultimate understanding is no praise, no blame. You can't, if someone is born with a beautiful voice and they sing and make a lot of money, we can praise them if we want, but fundamental understanding is that they didn't create that voice. There's somebody there that gets credit for being a good singer. It's like saying everybody could be president. Probably not. Or does that help you a little bit? Do you understand?
A little.
Further questions? So the last of the four is can be summed up in one word: peace. In other words, four marks of existence: impermanence, suffering, no self in the skandhas. There's no solid being anywhere. It just looks like it. And to see all of that, to understand all of that, to see that that's actually happening at those four marks, including the last one of peace, which is falling apart, nothing to do. It's just a way there's just like a kind of a grid or something we lay on the top of our life, of our world, and we use that as a temporary reference point to help us move our consciousness in such a way that we can more deeply understand any given situation. Permanent suffering without a self, and no warfare.
A while ago, you said something about the 14th century.
Won't jump up.
Well, actually, looking at your experience, you could say you mentioned spirit or soul.
Yes.
So, in what context were you using that, or what is that if there's no self?
There's nothing. There's no solid. Anything that comes together will come apart. So it's not saying that there isn't a feeling of being somebody. We're here. We have the five skandhas. We have form. We have feeling. We have perception. We have conceptual constructs and thinking, and we have the six sense seals and their objects. And the way it looks to me like everything is pretty separate. You guys are over there. I'm up here. It looks separate. So the whole situation is always reaffirming some kind of singularity or solidity in terms of being a living being. We kind of block out that this body-mind complex is going down. So there's an attachment to this particular body, mind, form, history. Our relationships are very, very strong. So we assume that that's solid, and that's what we try to protect. But who we actually are needs no protection. Who we actually are is unchanging. It's in the Zen tradition, they say, what was your face before your parents' birth? Go back and find that. You're probably going to find another face. And then what was your face before that birth? And what was your face before that? It's not that you won't find something happening there, but it won't be the same as this situation of being a living being bumping up against the furniture and blaming the car thief. And it's not that you shouldn't do something with a car thief, but to have an overwhelming feeling of hatred or resentment for that situation is just to have a narrow point of view of cause and effect. This caused that, and I want my revenge. So it's buying into the relative structure instead of seeing that that relative structure is there, but it is not separate. And as far as there being a spirit or soul, I think when I say think, I'm not here witnessing that right now, but it looks like there's something going on there in that direction. We call it, in our tradition, we call it Buddha nature. The word soul sounds a little bit too permanent for our Buddhist transcendental logic. Is that logic? Just like the things get more and more rarefied. It's like we've got this is here, but this is still moving in time. It's just moving very, very slow in what we call time. So everything is changing constantly. Question?
Well, then using the term Buddha nature, like you said, and thinking about it with spirit or soul, does Buddha nature have a cohesive consciousness that appears like a string of consciousness? I mean, why even use the term spirit or soul when we don't, we can kind of feel that yesterday we went to work and maybe what we're going to do tomorrow in this physical body.
Yes.
But when this physical situation is not the case, before we were born or when we're dead, what spirit or soul are you speaking of?
What do you think, Sokuzan? He's a monk, he should know. Monk with striped socks.
Alpaca socks.
So what's the fundamental question? Simple. Is there a soul or is there a spirit or not?
Yeah.
How's that?
Sure, thanks. Yeah.
Yes and no. What hasn't come into existence, to physical existence, can't really pass out of existence. It's just a way of talking about that particular area.
We've heard a lot, unborn, unceasing with the nature like the sky.
Good memory.
What is unborn, unceasing with a nature like the sky?
Well, if it's not born, then it's unceasing.
Is that permanence?
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. What do you think?
You don't need to call it permanence for it to be permanent. Is eternity permanent, or is it just a word for something that lasts a long time? See, what I'm trying to say is we're so used to having this relative kind of judgment, or this relative kind of this is what physicists are running into. They don't agree. I think it's amazing. They're talking about physical, solid, materialistic, and yet when they get way down to the smaller building blocks, the blocks start turning into mush. Do you know who you're looking at?
Me?
I'm getting embarrassed. It's embarrassing to have your own teaching come back. Further questions, or should we go eat?
We need some time to get ready.
Okay, so I'll take one more question if there is one. It's got to be a real easy one. So everybody has hard questions.
Okay.
Okay. Tammy,
So the car thief,
yes,
and just as a way to talk about, like, so someone's suffering because they need a car.
yes,
So, but then they stole your car before.
Yeah.
So, but you don't want, I mean, and their suffering is causing you to feel suffering, but you
Yeah.
still don't want to leave your keys there for them to steal your car again, right?
no, I
Or
don't
do you?
recommend that, no.
I mean, that's not making sense.
What's your
right?
question?
I mean, if they're suffering, if
Yeah.
you are feeling suffering because they're suffering, I mean, you don't just keep trying to.
No, here, let me respond to it this way. I'm getting I think I'm understanding. What I would say is in response to your question directly, what I perceive as your question, okay, is I would say, don't do anything unless you have to. Don't do anything unless you have to. The only thing you should do, because I'm telling you to, and you're, by being in this room for the next few minutes, you're giving me permission to tell you, is train your mind. Find out who you are. Sit down, hold still, train your mind, and don't worry too much about the car thief. Don't worry about it. Don't give him your car, though. No way. Don't give him your car. Keep your car. You need your car. But train your mind so you can see more clearly. So when you run into that kind of a situation, it starts to show up what is actually there rather than your concepts of what's there. So operating out of hope and fear or confusion, it's like sometimes our self-centeredness, we just feel like, I gotta do something. Well, I'll just do that, or I'll do that. Or we kind of do it spontaneously, or maybe not spontaneously, but impulsively. So I would say, don't do anything. Hold your seat. And don't do anything unless you have to, including blaming. We don't no point in blaming anyone for anything. Sometimes I even say, retract the blame. If you feel yourself blaming somebody, find out where that finger is pointing. Pull it back. Put it back in your holster. Yeah. Don't need to do that. That's a good practice, because sometimes blame is just spontaneous. Boom, it's just out there on just some situation. Especially it's someone who is our mate. So you were so close to them emotionally, and such a strong, intimate kind of relationship. Sometimes we just immediately go into some kind of accusation or blame, not even without even having any words yet. And I would say when that shows up, just put it back in the holster. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.